All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope you don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board for the board. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 82 of the KissFAQ podcast. I'm your host today, Julian Gill, admin on the KissFAQ message board. And joining me today are Marcus Almighty. Mark, welcome back, sir.
Hello.
Lonnie, St. Louis Kiss.
Hello.
And the voice of reason, Ken, 69th Blizzard. Gentlemen, good
Hello.
to see you. We're going to pick up an old topic that we've... Actually, before we get to the topic, let's do some headlines. The tour. It's doing well. Got the first box score today for anyone who cares about that sort of stuff. And Edmonton the other day, I think that's the 12th. They pulled 8,500 of 10,290, 81% sold for a gross of just over 550,000 US. That's a pretty decent tour gross, especially, you know, it's in line with everything they've done over the last few years in the States. So I think it looks positive.
Yeah.
The shows seem to be going well when Gene doesn't fall down. And
yeah.
No, I saw that.
I was gonna say, I hope he's feeling better because that looked like a really hard crash there.
Yeah, that was not nice. Huh?
They said that the crew was really giving him a hard time that night and the next couple days about it after it happened.
Yeah, I feel bad for him. I'm glad he didn't break a tailbone or anything, because he did go down like a big lump. A very Spinal Tap-ish, having the guys run on stage to help prop him back up. So I don't think Gene will ever say anything about Ace falling over again, but glad he's okay, and obviously the rock rolls on.
Tommy and Paul didn't run over to him and play their guitars over him like it's part of the show, you know.
It would have taken too long for them to run over there.
Yeah, he's just lucky like a flash pot wasn't about to go off, or he fell in the wrong location. So Gene's all right. The tour continues. They haven't really been changing up the set list much in the last few days.
No.
But you know what? It's still a damn good set now. You know, Flaming Youth, I'm jealous. I would love to hear that live. So it continues. They're not going to play The Oath. Okay. Or Trial by Fire.
Sorry, Julian.
All right, let's get into today's topic. As I said, it's one that we've kind of had two parts on already. It's them changes. It's the little changes and things that we'd like to do to the released albums to make them even more perfect than they are. And the last time I wasn't on the episode, the guys kindly left us to start off with the album that got me hooked on Kiss, of all things, and that is Asylum. So...
Nice jacket.
I got three things to say about that.
Yeah, it has not dated very well, but oddly, I think that's the first thing I would change personally about Asylum, and that is just the visuals, the costumes. Mm-hmm. They don't need to look like Twisted Sister, and the album cover. It has just caused so much aggro over the years that I don't think the album ever gets a fair listening by people who don't simply like the image of the band. The music on it, yeah, there's a couple of dud tracks for me, but I wouldn't even change them because all in all, I find it a very unified album. It's just the image. I would love if we could go back in time and put them in maybe, just leather. If they were just doing a tough street leather kind of thing and hadn't gone all Motley Crue and Twisted Sister, then I think they would have probably had a better reaction to that album. What do you guys think? I'm going to go to Ken first.
Yeah, well, my first reaction is when I first bought that album on the day it came out. I know it was Tower Records. I remember it. And I looked at it like, what the heck did they do? What's with this album cover? It's like, oh my gosh! It's like I was hoping the music was better than what I was seeing on the front, the presentation was kind of goofy. And actually the picture inside or on the back of the cover is actually better. So that presentation was okay. I mean, we started seeing those videos and with their outfits, and it was kind of what are you doing here? But fortunately, the music is good, and I didn't have a problem. Music was most of the album's pretty darn good, and the sound's pretty good. They did a pretty decent production on it, and but the album cover is just I would have changed that for sure.
So listen with your ears and not with your eyes, folks. Lonnie, what do you say?
It's true.
Yeah, I think we're all going to echo the same sentiment about the album cover. Is just atrocious looking, and it's not it's I guess it's dated for the time, but it's just atrocious looking, and I think people even and it hasn't aged well either. It was bad then, and it's bad now, and I think not that people buy CDs anymore either, so my argument's going to be kind of void. But I remember being a teenager and going back and getting some of these albums that I didn't buy when they came out. I was like, no. I mean, I would look at Asylum like, I can skip that one that I haven't bought. I haven't bought Lick It Up yet. Let me buy that. That one, just listening with your eyes, it looks better than Asylum does. You know what I mean? And I think that held true not only when the album came out, but as far as people going and getting back catalog stuff when people still bought CDs. I guess now, if you're gonna go get Kiss Asylum, you're just gonna I guess people who don't have it are just gonna download it on iTunes most of the time anyway, unless you're a guy like a lot of us are and still have to have the hard copy CD or vinyl version of a record. But and if you're going on iTunes, you can at least preview it and say, oh, this doesn't sound as bad as the album cover looks. So for me, I think the back cover is bad looking too, but at the same time, I think that back album cover, the band looks a whole lot, even the picture of them looks a whole lot better than the way they displayed themselves on the videos. So I'm kind of with Julian on that. I mean, I really like some of the songs on there. Like, I really like King of the Mountain. I mean, it's a great song to work out to. It's a great song to get you fired up. And I really like Love's a Deadly Weapon even, and I might be in a minority on that, but it's a really fun song. And I wouldn't change a whole lot of the music, but I if you're going to change anything about Asylum, the first thing you do is change the artwork, and just change the presentation of the band. If they just, I wish they would have, just stuck with, like you said, like just a black leather look like of what, maybe just like what a Metallica was, like a primitive Metallica was doing almost at the time, and just instead of going hairbandish and Twisted Sister and following what Kiss does best and following the trends. So for me, it's presentation. I'm right there with you.
Yeah, and you know what? As far as the look goes, they were doing the same thing everyone else seemed to be doing. Look at Twisted Sister in '84. Motley Crue also went that route and Motley looked even worse. I gotta at least say, even as bad as Gene looks in the Asylum era, and this is his lowest point visually for me. It's B. Arthur Experience. Motley Crue just looks absolutely stupid in the Theater of Pain period. Especially Nicky, but it must be something about bass players. And then you got other bands like Wasp that also gone this route, and seeing Wasp all glammed up was a very scary thing, I think. Totally wrong.
Yeah.
Totally wrong.
That doesn't work.
Mark, what's your take on this?
Well, as most people know, this is my favorite non-makeup Kiss record. So for me, there's nothing really too much wrong with this record. The cover, I agree with everybody, could have been a lot better, obviously. The one thing about the production I didn't like about this, and probably the only thing I didn't like about it, is I didn't like the excessive use of reverb that Paul Stanley and them used on this record. I mean, I know it's very much of the time that there was a lot of albums that were reverb heavy at this point and stuff like that, but I really thought if they would have maybe took that knob and just turned it down just a hair, it might have been a little bit more punchier and might have actually dated a little bit better and wouldn't have stood out so much as a mid-'80s, late 80s record. It would have probably, just been a really good Kiss record. With that said, the one thing about this record that I'm going to talk about just really quickly is I think they did one thing really good with this record. They did the Animalized tour, and from what I've read in many different sources, whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I've heard that when they were done the tour, they pretty much just went home for like about a few weeks and got right back into the studio and started working on Asylum, which I think really was a great idea. And I got to commend Paul and those guys for doing that, because I think they took the momentum of that tour, because they did started picking up their audience again, because Animalize did do pretty good, right? So they started picking up crowds again. And I think they started feeling that something was starting to happen. So they went in with probably a lot better frame of mind. And I think it really showed on the songs. I think that they had a good energy with it, because they didn't wait around like half a year before they went back in. The momentum didn't die in their, in the feeling of when they went to write the songs. And I think that it really benefited the songwriting. I think that that's one thing that they should have kept in their heads for future albums, when they were, going to go in and do stuff, to maybe just go in right after.
Right. I'll agree with you on that. I think Gene's songs as well are a vast improvement on the previous album. So, from that perspective, it was definitely building on something.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Before we move on to the next one, I just want to add in at this point, the next album really should be Kiss Alive 3, because I was always of the belief that, as a new fan, when I looked back at Asylum, Animalize, and Lick It Up being the albums that came before it, it just felt like the right time to have a live album next, when you saw that Kiss had done its first live album after 3 albums. For me, just going back to the non-makeup period. Excuse me, I gotta go. Lonnie, can you take over for me?
UPS.
So, I think, I'm on board with what Julian's saying, in that. And what do you guys think? That those 3 albums kind of in a row, Lick It Up, the first 3 non-makeup albums in a row, were kind of like kind of relate to each other. Like Mark said, they got off the Animalized tour, went right in and wrote Asylum, and people consider those 2 albums like sister albums. Like a lot of people consider like Lick It Up and Creatures of the Night kind of sister albums as well. So, and before they really go into even more of a change with Crazy Nights being more of a maybe a Bon Jovi type album, almost you could call it. I think in Alive 3 right there would have worked really well with the band having played a lot of shows on the Asylum tour. The band had gelled with Bruce on guitar, with Eric on the drums for a while. At this point, it would have been nice to hear an Alive 3 filled with a lot of those 80 songs at that point, instead of what we ended up getting on the Revenge tour. So.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Sorry about that.
I was just echoing what you said, that I thought it would have been a great time actually for that, because of the sister albums that people say Animalize and Asylum are, and before they really jump ship and go Bon Jovi-ish with Crazy Nights.
Yeah, they could have pulled. They could have pulled from even not just those 3 albums, but they could have pulled music from the Creatures tour, the Lick It Up tour, and all the way up to Asylum,
and even Dynasty, because even Dynasty and Unmasked
technically
stuff.
Yeah.
You look at what some of the set lists were in the period. I think Animalize Live Uncensored, is a good representation of live in that period. Yeah, it's too damn fast now for a lot of people's taste, but add on the songs that they're kind of doing in the Asylum tour, and you've got a good reason to have a break. Which is what they wanted for what became the Crazy Nights album. So let's go into that one. And this was a heartbreaker of an album for me. It's obviously the first album I bought new as a Kiss fan. And I remember, I was living in Binghamton, upstate New York at the time, and getting on my bike and riding down to Music City in downtown Binghamton to get the album. And I'd been calling them is there a new Kiss out? Is there a new Kiss out? And they're like, shut the fuck, go away. You annoying Kiss fan. Finally, it's out. I get on my bike. I ride down there. It's like 5 miles from my house. And I get it. And I've got my Walkman. And I put the tape in. And it starts playing. I'm like, what the hell? I've by that time I've gone back through the catalog, and I know that Kiss is cool. I know they've got a great back catalog.
Yeah.
And I've experienced the rebuilding process of them as a band. So what would we change here? Number 1, life is not a radio. Do not turn up your vocals to 10. The first thing I would do and maybe it resonates a little bit with Paul Stanley today and his voice, is get his glass-shattering, caterwauling vocals down into a more comfortable range. I can't listen to a lot of that stuff now simply because of the vocals. My Way, which was actually a song I thought was one of the better ones on the album back in the day, I find too high-pitched. I just find it too reaching, too trying to be who is it, Jim Gillette, Nitro, the vocal orgasms. It's just too over the top. Material-wise, and again, I'm one of the people who've heard the demos of Crazy Nights and When Your Walls Come Down and some of the other Paul songs. They're tough and ballsy in their demo form. I would get rid of Nevison out of the picture. He polished the shit out of them, and I know that's what the band wanted. He delivered exactly what they asked for, so it's no blame on him. I just think it's the totally wrong thing to do to that material. It is perfectly fine as hard rocking, and it is really not very good trying to sound like a Heart album. Let Heart be Heart.
Exactly.
And Kiss be Kiss. So I would then also say that the rear album cover has to go. I do not want to see Paul's
You don't like that?
mankini ever. I just don't need to see it, or his chest rug. I just don't want to. No. So I'm going to go straight to Mark with this one as he was nodding his head a little bit. So, Mark, Crazy Nights.
Well, like I said, this album's always been the victim of the wrong producer. I mean, for a record that they waited for over a year and almost completely bankrupted themselves personally waiting to do it, I mean, they should have maybe looked a little harder. I mean, I know that he had a good record going in, having done Ozzy's record and stuff like that, and it really turned Ozzy around, so why wouldn't it turn Kiss around, right? But I just think that there was other people that could have did better for them at that point. They needed more somebody like a Tom Werman or somebody more like a Keith Olsen or somebody who at that point was along that track of music but could have still gave them a little bit more of a heavier thing but kept their commercial flair to it. I mean, Keith Olsen did some wonders with Whitesnake and stuff like that. And I mean, that self-titled Whitesnake record was like a complete, like, through the roof hit, right? And I mean, that's not exactly like the heaviest record. It's very commercial. There's lots of stuff in it, but it also has great guitars and really cool drums and stuff like that. And that's the kind of stuff that Kiss needed in their songs. You know, they didn't need it to be, like you said, a hard record or a really polished, over the top 20 kind of, you know, geared record. It just needed to be Kiss, but Kiss for the times. And while they did try to do that with Nevison, I just think that he just wasn't the right guy. It's not that he isn't a good producer. He's just the wrong producer for Kiss. They needed somebody who knew a little bit more about the street cred kind of stuff and who can make it a little bit more harder. I just think that I keep thinking, you know, Keith Olsen or Tom Werman for sure. Because I mean, Werman just did Girls, Girls, Girls then too, right? Which is not exactly the best Motley Crue record, but it definitely has a bit more balls than Crazy Nights does, right?
Yeah, but I think it still suffers from some of the same things that we're talking about with Kiss's album, that it's overly polished, the Motley sound, but, you know, it took, I guess it took their sound back from, they were completely over polished for theater, and it took them a little bit away from that. But, you know, Nevison was the guy Paul Stanley wanted to produce his solo album in 78 and couldn't get him, so it's one of those strange things kind of that I guess Paul got his wish, but I don't think it's the tool. He's the tool. It's the instruction set the tool was given.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, like, but if you listen to like Girls, for example, I mean, you know, like songs like Wild Side, like that, those guitars are pretty rip roaring, okay, on that song, much more than anything that was on Crazy Nights. You know what I mean? I mean, I know that it did suffer similar problems, but like you said just now, I mean, compared to Theater of Pain, this is a really much more heavier record, and it suited their whole going back to the motorcycles and Harley kind of thing. And I think that Kiss should have maybe tried to lean more to that direction. I think, again, it's more Kiss kind of are, you know, always do something, you know, about a year behind everybody kind of thing, right? So, but I definitely think that the record could have been good. They had a lot of decent songs on there. It was just a matter of if they would have had the right guy to kind of, polish them up, maybe made them look at it a little bit harder, maybe polish up a few things here and there, like song structure wise, it would have been a bit better.
Yeah, agreed. Ken, what say you?
Yeah, I wrote notes down for this weeks ago before I think our second episode of this, and I wrote for a producer. I was thinking Bruce Fairbairn at that time. I was thinking get him at that time. He was doing pretty well, and I think he'd a little bit definitely be harder edged than Nevison was.
Yeah, because he was working on good records then.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought that would have been the good time to have him right at that time. And again, I agree. I do agree with you, Julian, about the vocals. I mean, Paul Stanley is like, what? He's, I guess, getting ready for a Phantom or of the Opera or something. He's practicing his range, full range. But I think that could have, probably messed his vocals up down the line where it's 2009 or 8 or whatever started to go. It may have contributed to his vocal problems today. But I would have definitely lowered the vocals. And then the songs were well written songs. They're good songs.
Extremely.
But again, it's just a production thing. I would have rather have had Gene with the more. So he toned down his vocals too for his songs. So we don't have the the Cookie Monster or like you say vocals. You kind of want the more mean vocals from Gene. So yeah. And then the back cover, if we're talking about marketing of that thing, the front cover I was okay with it, but the back cover is like I didn't need to see some of the those shots. I guess I'm sure they had other shots they could have put in for Paul instead of the one they used. So I don't know, but again, Bruce Fairbairn I thought would have been the guy.
You know what though? Can I just say one thing really quickly? As far as what you mentioned about the vocals, I think that's a very critical point that you brought up because at this time, Paul Stanley is getting into his middle 30s, maybe mid 30s at that point. And, at this point, the voice starts changing as you get older, right? And while he's still excellent and could hit every kind of note imaginable at that point, I think it would have been smart and the right producer would have maybe brought this up is to start thinking long term with these songs. Because if you're going to try to attempt to do these songs 20 years from now or 10 years from now, can you do this? And he can't, And I mean, a lot of producers done that with other bands. They did that a little bit with Aerosmith. They did that with Rush, definitely. They told Geddy to tame it down a bit with some of his singing because, in 2010, you're not going to be able to sing like he did on 2112, right? And that's the thing, So you have to kind of take that approach. And I think Paul, again, probably thought, hey, man, I can sing like this forever, So he probably didn't even take that approach seriously. And maybe the right guy didn't get in his ear to maybe think about that. But I thought he should have thought about that around that time.
Well, if you were to listen to that, he's straining. I mean, to get to some of that stuff and to continue to do that is just crazy.
It's hard in the voice.
I think that's a great point, and it goes to show why they don't play a lot of these 80s songs anymore, other than maybe the popularity of some of these 80s songs. But I think that plays a large role in the song selection that they play today. Is the fact that Paul can't sing some of these songs anymore in 2016 versus what we were doing before. So I think that plays a major role in it. That I think that's an excellent point, Mark. That maybe we could have looked, and at the same time too, they might not have thought Kiss was going to be playing in 2016 either.
It's true.
There's no way they thought they'd still be going.
I
really can't see
at this point.
I don't have images of Paul Stanley sitting there doing the set list for the Freedom to Rock tour and saying, "Hey Gene, do you want to do Bang Bang You?" Yeah, I just don't see it even.
You're gonna bring that?
No.
No, and I was shocked when they brought Crazy Nights back into the set.
Oh yeah.
that just to me, because I was in England at the time when that was a freaking hit, I just hate it. I hate that song. I love the demo. I hate the song they released. Love the demo. So go figure. Anything else you want to change, Lonnie?
Well, obviously, I'm going to echo the sentiment of the back cover. I think it's, they look a bit ridiculous. They look, at least they're not at least you can say this, that they're off the Asylum tour, and they've at least changed their look a little bit, that we're not sticking with that. At least they're showing that. I will give them that. But I don't need to see a gentleman in his mid-30s showing off.
I'm not even going to pull that album out to show you that. I don't want to put you through that.
Yeah. But I mean, as bad as the back cover is, and we've all said that, the front cover is excellent. I love the front of the cover. And it's one of my favorite non-makeup album covers. And the songs are good, but there are some clunkers in there as well. And I think I would have put in Hide Your Heart on this album, as opposed to saying, oh no, Hide Your Heart, we're not going to put that on, but we're going to leave Bang Bang You on. That Hide Your Heart doesn't hold up, but Bang Bang You and When Your Walls Come Down, that's where it's at. And Hide Your Heart, well, that's just not good enough to make it. I don't know who the hell is making that decision, and whoever it was should have been fired, because that's unbelievable to me. And had you released Hide Your Heart when you did, you might have had a bigger hit on your hand, instead of waiting to release it on Hot in the Shade, when you have multiple people recording and releasing the same song. So not only the back cover and the product, and I thought your guys' sentiment about the production as well. I mean, the production is almost unlistenable. On some, it's just really bad. I really wish they would have just made a straight up rock record instead of being Kiss and following trends at that point. So
yeah, I think if there's two songs on this album that are clunkers, it's Bang Bang You and No 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 for me. And if you just swap those out for Sword and Stone and Hide Your Heart,
absolutely,
then you lose one Gene song, but so what? The other Gene songs on this are, they're decent enough. I do like Good Girl Gone Bad, and his Thief in the Night's also good. So I think Gene had continued. I mean, it's nothing exceptional, but it's perfectly adequate. I quite like his vocals on this. When he's kind of singing a little bit more softly rather than growling his way, it suits the material better. So, those would be the changes that make, and also the legendary "Are You Always This Hot?" Just because I have no idea what it sounds like, and I'm sure we could take out another Paul vocal and put that one in just for the sake.
Good title.
Yeah, great title. I mean, it was just a disappointment for me, but I'm over it. No, I'm not, but I'm used to it. No,
it does sound like it.
Liar. Let's go into the best-selling album of the 1980s.
There you go.
The double platinum smashes, thrashes, and hits. Dear God, get a nice pick for my eyes. Yeah, it's Crazy Nights era. I think, as far as the band image goes on the front, apart from Paul and his silly little hand thing. I don't know what that means.
Singing hands.
Yeah, peacock or whatever. Gene looks good. The band looks good. But what would I change about this album? I think I would get rid of the two songs Paul brought to the show. Both of those are completely disposable. I would take two other Kiss songs and put them on. And I wouldn't put Shock Me on there and have Bruce sing it. I would pick two more classics. Yeah. Like the one... what did they put on in England? They put... what? Reason to Live and Crazy Nights. Okay. Maybe that doesn't quite work.
Never mind.
A flaw in my logic. But I would get rid of the new songs and put Hide Your Heart on there. There you go.
Yeah, how about Hide Your Heart and Sword in the Stone?
Yeah,
that could have been the bonus song.
Sort of.
Still didn't make the cut for those.
I got to hand it to the band, and back in the day when this album did come out, I was excited. Oh, 2 new songs. I remember reading Kerrang, and we're in the studio. I think they were out there for Ritz and Donington in '88, and they were talking about doing some studio work and doing the new songs. Like, oh, great, and I'd get rid of Beth. Sorry, Eric. That's just it's just wrong.
Yeah.
I don't care how desperate he was to get in the studio. It's just wrong. So I would only be dealing with those 3 new tracks and getting rid of them. Lonnie.
Well, I agree with you about the 3 tracks, and like I said about Sword in the Stone or Hydra Heart. How about those instead of Rock Hard and Let's Put the X in Second? I mean, 2 just atrocious and embarrassing songs, in my opinion, that are pretty much unlistenable. And for me, a lot of the album is unlistenable too. I hate the remixes of the songs on here, the way they're really just drummed down. No pun intended, drummed down. But and you're gonna think about the landscape of music by late '88 when this came out too. Like Appetite for Destruction had really hit hard at this point and had been the #1 album in the country, and the hardcore glam stuff had really started to fade, and we're getting more into a rock feel. And I know the album sold well, by putting out these songs, people buying them, maybe some people buying them on CD for the first time. And the good thing about this album too is what it brought Kiss back to playing those classics on the Hot in the Shade tour on their next proper tour. But the remixes for me are just bad, in my opinion, too. But the album cover, I don't have a problem with the album cover front or back. But the way they just dumbed down those songs, I think as much as the album sold, I think it could have sold better had they kept them true to their form as opposed to making them what they are. What are you showing me here?
The chart positioning.
Ah, yes, chart. So
yeah, so it was 21.
So that's my opinion. That's my opinion. I think with what was going on in music at the time, and I think bands were getting heavier, and I think Kiss just toned it down instead of bringing it up with what was trending at the point. And it's kind of disappointing, even though the album did sell well. And of course, Let's Put the X in Sex and Make Me Rock Hard. I'd get rid of that.
Mark.
Yeah, well, for me, I know everybody seems to talk about the first 2 songs, right? But I really had an issue with the rest of the record, to be honest. I mean, out of the songs that are on there, the only ones that didn't get remixed, and I wrote this down just so that I was sure about this, was that Lick It Up, Heaven's on Fire, Tears Are Falling, and I Was Made for Loving You were the only ones that were not remixed off of the records. So there's a lot of other songs here that did. Love Gun, Detroit Rock City, I Love It Loud, Deuce, Rock and Roll Night, Shout It Out Loud, Strutter, Dr. Love. I mean, the thing that really bugged me about it is when I first got this, I got it through Columbia Records Club. I remember it got sent to me on cassette, and I put it in my car. And I was like, oh, cool, let's put it in. And then, at this point, I was really just a beginner with this whole, audio recording stuff. But I knew right away when I listened to it, I was like, what's wrong with their guitars? Like, especially on Strutter and Deuce and stuff like that, they really softened the tone of the sound of the band. And there was some really weird reverb they put on the drums, especially on Deuce. When I listened to that, even today, I listened back to it, and I was like, why are they putting this really bad reverb on the drums? It just really seemed like they tried to soften their catalog to kind of make it more accessible for everybody. And maybe in a sense that did work because, like we all said earlier, what Julian said earlier, it is their highest selling album, right? At this point, right? So it worked in that capacity because I do remember that the version of Rock and Roll Night that's on this album was played all the time on the radio in Toronto here. And even now when they play a lot of the times that version of it still on the radio, which kind of makes me scratch my head because they have so many different versions of it available to them now, the 97 remasters, or you name them, a dozen other compilations that they could take it from. And why are they playing it off of this all the time? I don't understand, but I just find that as abysmal as the first 2 songs are, at least at that point they were kind of they were kind of par for the course at that time. But why they remixed all those classic songs, and in my opinion, they didn't make it sound better. Like, I mean, Shout It Out Loud, for some reason they turned up the piano more on that, especially in the chorus when you do that line, the bass line where the piano follows the bass line. It's turned up a lot more in this version than it ever was on the original, and stuff like that. I just don't know why they did things to make it softer than rather more rockin'. That's really my biggest thing that I would have changed. I would have left those things as they were. Of course, I would agree with you guys to maybe put 2 better songs on at the beginning of the record, obviously. But I just think that they should have just left those songs as they were. That's my biggest gripe of this record.
Ken, how about you?
Okay. So, no, I was looking at something on the internet because I was trying to remember because I don't have it in front of me. But at around the same time, I believe, Kiss in Japan they had Chikara, that was released, right? It was.
Yep.
Was it 88?
Yeah, that came out in May of that year.
Okay, and to tell you the truth, I enjoyed that one. I had bought that one, and I enjoyed that much more. It had some of the same songs on there. It didn't have anything, the new ones that were throwaways. It didn't have Beth, but it had Rock and Roll All Night, of course. But it had I Was Made for Loving You, the remix. That's the 12-inch. Single, the 7 minutes and 56 long, and they had Creatures of the Night on there, remix, the I Love It Loud 85 remaster. I guess that's really a remix too, right? War Machine's on there. Look it up. All Hell's Breaking Loose, Heaven's on Fire, Thrills in the Night. It's mostly the 80s stuff. Which to me makes more sense, because Double Platinum had all the early stuff, and you really didn't need to put on some of the old stuff. Though they did, again, they threw Detroit Rock City, Rock and Roll All Night, Love Gun on this album, on Chikara. So I think they should have went that way instead of doing the smashes. I think it would have still sold the same or better, because I think people were looking for a greatest hits compilation of their 80s stuff, because you could just go back to, Double Platinum and get most of their best stuff from the early days. So, I mean, otherwise, Smashes it's okay. But again, I would have rather them just release Chikara also in the United States.
Yeah, I think I definitely got to agree that Chikara's a more, kind of representative greatest hits of the 80s. When you've still got Double Platinum in print, if it was out of print, you can understand them and probably balancing a bit further towards the 70s and the 80s. But if you've already got a 70s compilation that's got those core albums represented, then Chikara, I would say, very well balances just giving you those 4 songs from the 70s and the other, 12, are from the 80s, excluding Crazy Nights. So it's a good selection.
If you want to represent the whole period from the beginning, usually do it in, an anthology type thing, right? So,
Hey, Ken, who was the producer, executive producer for Chikara? Does it say?
Well, executive producer.
Yeah, who oversaw it? Because I'm just wondering, because I'm just wondering if somebody did a different mix job for those songs there than the one that's on Smashes.
See if I can find it here.
I don't think there was even enough information in the booklet to determine that, because...
Oh, really? Eh? Okay.
I'd have to go look it up.
Yeah,
or look at my CD.
I don't remember the booklet having anything that I could decipher as being an executive producer, but it was probably someone at Polystar.
Because I just find it interesting that when Double Platinum came out, and whenever we would talk about that record, sure, people had issues a little bit with songs here and there, but not nearly as much I found with the remixing of those songs of like at that time than this album. You know what I mean? It just seems like Mike Stone and Sean Delaney did a more better job, I think, of their remixing than whoever did this batch.
Yeah, but 1978 was also closer sonically to 1976 and 1975.
Yeah,
88 is a generation away, so I think probably a lot had changed. And, someone like Sean Delaney probably had a lot more respect for the catalog.
True.
When he's talking about, how does one remix, Bob Ezrin, he is willing to kind of leave it alone more and just try and get an overall blend of the sonics of the different producers so that you've got the unified package. Whereas there's a full-scale reinvention. They're changing the ingredients in the mixes on Smashes. Remember, people used to think that Deuce was like an unreleased, version because of what had been done to it, and you had more of the run out of that song from the original master tapes left in the remix version. So it had, and like I think you said, Mark, that it's got a different feel, and Strutter's got a, the way they've been softened. So I think whoever did Shakar was more honest to the catalog and probably left the stuff a lot more alone than whoever did the rest of the tracks on Smashes. But I think also, whereas we talked about the case with Ron Nevison, that it was instructions from the band, I think that was also the case with Smashes, that they were instructed to update the sound of these songs. That was the whole purpose, as was said. So is it successful looking back, what are we, 28 years later? No. But it sold well throughout the time. It sold well as a package. So I think from Kiss's point of view, it'd be mission accomplished. Here we are talking about Smashes, Thrashes, and hits.
Right.
So it's a win for the band. It's their last platinum album, if I'm correct, and I think it is. So, wow, yeah, what a bookend to your platinum career. So I think I can't remember which one of you guys said it, was that this kind of lays the groundwork for more of the classic songs to come out in the next album's tour. So Hot in the Shade. I was so happy when this album came out. I was excited. Where was I? I was living in Singapore, and it was a real challenge to find it. And I was so excited when I did. And then I saw there were 15 songs in it, and I was like, okay, this is not going to be like Crazy Nights all over again. They can't do it to me twice. And you put on Rise to It, and you're like, okay, cool. There's like a kind of, I don't know, how do you describe, Mark, how do you describe the intro to Rise to It?
Well, it's a very bluesy kind of based, very Cinderella.
Cinderella.
Long cold winter. I mean, falling apart at the seams. So I loved it. And I got to say, what are the changes that I would make to this album? I would prune out all of the fluff. There is so much filler on this album that, we could go through it and probably lose 5 tracks easily, prune it down to a 10-track album, and get rid of some of the stuff that really, as Paul Stanley has said, should have been left as a demo. Which, I mean, the whole album's demos, but they should have been left on the cutting room floor. And some of the stuff's his songs. It's not a high quality record. There are a couple of gems buried in this album. Obviously, Forever is going to be the standout track, is the most commercially successful, and the one that's got the most history. But there's stuff like Betrayed. Yeah, Love's a Slap in the Face. Silver Spoon. I'm gonna throw another Stanley one in there. Little Caesar, Boomerang, garbage for me. Could easily chop all of those and replace them with Shock.
Well, I mean, I think that's the main problem with this record, I would say, is that there's just so much on there and a lot of it isn't even that good. And I mean, the thing that I find really interesting about this period is that they've openly said, and I've read in a lot of different books, and like even like the Behind the Mask book, they were saying that money wasn't exactly flowing at this point for them at this part of their career. So hence why they went to the Fortress, which is known to be a demo recording studio to record, and they went in and pretty much just took their demos that they were all happy with and kind of fleshed them out and tried to make them into proper album sounding songs. And really, again, what this needed badly was a proper record producer, and at this point they had many available to them at this point. People again like Keith Olsen come to mind. Bob Rock at this point was on his own. He just did Dr. Feelgood and stuff like that, so he was high on the list. Beau Hill, who did some of these other albums, like some pretty good rockin' records at that time when he did. I think he did some Rat records and stuff like that. And
yeah, he did he Detonator, fantastic album.
Yeah, and he would have been good to use, but I think again what crippled them from doing something like that was the money situation. I think, because I remember Gene saying that he would haggle with industry people to get cheaper rates on 2-inch tape, and he would haggle for this and that to make the recording costs cheaper for them because they just didn't have a lot of cash. And I mean, if you're gonna get Beau Hill or Bob Rock, believe me, you're going to be paying for it, right? So maybe that's why those people weren't in play at this point, but boy, did it ever sorely need it, because with left to their own devices at this point, we see what Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons' production gives us. Nothing too good, I mean, they totally lucked out with the fact that Forever did as good as it did, because that's actually the only thing that springboarded them into a proper big tour, of which Whitesnake, ironically, I think, opened for them here in Canada on the Canadian leg here, which was funny because when they played at the CNE Grandstand here, I heard lots of stories about the fact that when Whitesnake was done opening, that a lot of people started drifting out of the arena at that point. So, I don't know how well the record did here in Canada, but I know Whitesnake did really well, and there's another Keith Olsen reference there. Maybe they should have, talked to him afterwards, about doing stuff with them in the future, because it sure as hell helped Whitesnake,
Yeah, the album went to 46 in Canada, so a bit of a dud, really, missing the top 40. And I was wrong with Beau Hill and Detonator. He did Reach for the Sky, god awful album. It was who was it? Payson who did Detonator, which is a way better album. And I think also Kiss opened for Whitesnake at that show, because I think Paul was bad mouthing Cover.
Oh, really? Was it
on stage, and for not allowing him to the Kiss to use all their pyro or something like that. I don't know. I don't have notes on that right now, but that's my recollection. Hot in the Shade, Ken.
Yeah, I have to agree with Mark. I had written down that finish the songs and get a producer. Yeah, it's a little too long. Everyone's trying to fit more on CDs. There's a lot more room to add music on CDs rather than vinyl, which you could do with vinyl. So they were doing that. Let's just put as much as we can. It was like, oh, you're getting more for your money. No, we're not really getting. I want quality, not quantity. So, and then the album cover. It's kind of. We've talked about the album covers before, and we had some better ideas. Mark had a real good idea about that one, about the sun tanning kind of thing. But yeah, the music, some of it's pretty good. I mean, some of it I enjoy. Maybe about half of it I enjoy. I would say if it's 50%. So it's 50% okay for me, and the other. But again, it needs a producer. I think production wise, it would have helped a lot of those songs stand out much. It would have been stronger than they appeared in their form. So that's it's not one of my favorite albums. It's okay. I think I listen to it more than I do Crazy Nights. So those are kind of on my lower end of the albums for Kiss. But what does Lonnie have to say about it?
Well, my problem, I'm with you there. My biggest problem with Hot in the Shade is that it's too long. And just because you can fit 70 whatever minutes worth of music on a CD doesn't mean that you should. Exactly.
That's
And
that's the
there's Exhibit A right there.
one of the ones you trim.
There's Exhibit A right there. I mean, why? Just because you can fit it on there doesn't mean that you should. If you trim this album down, like Julian was saying, to about 10 songs, you could have a pretty decent record, and I think it would be a record that a lot of people would respect even to this day. Because when a lot of Kiss fans think about Hot in the Shade, what do they think about? They go, oh, God, there's some clunkers on there, is the first thing a lot of people think of. Not that, oh, Forever's on there, and that Rise to It's on there, and Hide Your Heart's on there. And there are some good songs on there, but the first thing you think of is how crappy King of Hearts and Little Caesar and Boomerang and some of the other crap that's on there. So what I would do to fix this album is, first of all, would be to trim it down to about 10 songs. And then, and this is one thing I'm surprised none of you said, is that I would change the freaking cover instead of having a Sphinx with sunglasses on. I think that's the most ridiculous looking thing you could have possibly put on the album cover.
I mentioned it several times.
What?
I mentioned it several times before.
I think he fell asleep during that.
Sorry.
Oh boy.
But yeah, we did say that because Ken said we've mentioned album covers in the past. Never mind.
I'm actually I've been looking at the album cover for the last couple of months. I'm kind of liking it.
I have when I went to the show, I have those sunglasses that say Kiss on the side. I bought those sunglasses. I still have them. But the other thing I want to say, with the length of the CD and the albums, they could have combined songs, Gene and Paul, and they could have put things, how they combine songs, and it makes it better, makes it an anthem.
Yeah.
They could have combined Hide Your Heart and Rise to It and made Rise Your Heart.
Oh, Jesus.
Just like
that is
Julian
never.
I managed not to say that today.
That is never going to go away.
That's just going to follow me around.
I thought Kent, you were going to say they could have combined King of Hearts and Cadillac Dreams or something like that and made a really crappy song.
Well, they do have Read My Body on there, so I don't think they really need to compete that much.
That should have been the hidden track.
But I think one of the interesting things that we've said is that they needed a producer. So what the hell was Vinnie Poncia doing? Because
I don't know.
Songwriting, probably.
Yeah, no songwriting, but his name's all over this, and I just don't think that you get the benefit of what he was good at out of him. He may have helped out with the songwriting a bit, but it didn't really come through enough. So even the songs that he worked on are not that great. I mean, come on, he's got a credit on Silver Spoon, which is just that's an abomination. That's up there with Read My Body and Bang Bang You for me personally. Surely they could have thrown him a bone, and if they had had someone in the studio to make them sound better, anything would have been better.
But you know what though? I wonder though when his help was done. Like, was he with Paul, like maybe in his apartment writing the songs then, or was he actually in the studio with them? Because I mean, a lot of the times they could have wrote these songs outside the studio with other writers or people like that, and then bring those songs into the studio and record them. Right? It would have been more beneficial for them. And I would hate to think that they had Vinnie Poncia in a studio with them and not say, hey, Vinny, nudge, nudge here. Go turn a few knobs that are on the board or something, get him to get involved a bit. Because, as much as we knock the two records that he's made, one of them did really, really well for them. Yep. So why wouldn't they use them,
Yeah, and I think when we do knock the records a little bit, I think everyone does respect the songwriting and the effort that was made on Dynasty and Unmasked. So, sure that it was a change from what Kiss had been doing, but it was also some pretty well-crafted music regardless. So, but I think, when they do their focus group after Hot in the Shade, why do we have an album that stiffs at gold again? When the tour was a success, thank goodness for, Forever taking off and allowing them to get out there. They had their best tour of the decade. Well, Yeah, of the deck of no, because
Yeah.
they toured in '90. They toured in '90, of course. They still had a really good tour, but their best tour, in essence, of the Unmasked era. So their focus groups tell them what they got to do, and they do it with Revenge. Lonnie, lead us into Revenge. What would you change on Revenge?
Well, I have mentioned this before. One thing I would change on Revenge, and I really, really like the song, but I don't think it fits well on Revenge, and that's God Gave Rock and Roll to You. I don't think it fits well with the image the band is trying to portray in the first few songs with Unholy, Take It Off, Tough Love, Spit, and then God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and then go back into Domino. It kind of, and don't get me wrong, I really like the song, but it doesn't fit with the vibe of the record. But I understand why it's on there, because it was a hit for them off of Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey soundtrack, and they wanted to, it was a hit, so we can throw it on here, and maybe it'll help sell a few more records, just because people know that song's on there. So, I mean, I get it why it's on there, but I don't like the fact that it's on there. I think that either you write you put another song on there and leave that off, or make the album just one track less. And the Car Jam, I'm not a real big fan of Car Jam 81. If they want to have a tribute to Eric Carr on the record, I mean, they dedicated the album to Eric, but I think maybe if you wanted to have a tribute to Eric on that album, instead of doing what they did and reworking the guitars with Bruce on there, would be to maybe release like a live drum solo from Eric, or a live recording of Eric, just so that Eric could have been documented in some kind of official audio release of him playing live in concert. So those are the two really things I would change. Is I would get rid of God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and I'm not criticizing the song. I really like the song, but it just doesn't fit the vibe of the record. And I would have paid homage to Eric Carr in a different way than the Car Jam 81. But other than that, the album, and I know you guys are going to say differently, but other than that, I think the album is fantastic, and there's not anything I would change about it.
Mark, thanks for all those videos while Lonnie was talking. What do you think about Revenge? What would you change, if anything?
Well, I think Lonnie might be surprised with my answer here, but I actually think that this record, from a production point of view, is really, really excellent. I think Bob Ezrin redeemed himself in my eyes with this album. I mean, after the abomination that was The Elder, in that sense of what they went down, the path that they took, he really took them back to where they needed to be. And I think the only problem with this record, apart from a few songs, I mean, I'm not too big on Spit or Heart of Chrome or songs like that. I mean, they're not terrible songs, but I think they could have did a little bit better, considering they had Bob Ezrin, who's a top-notch songwriter guy too, who could have maybe. I'm honestly surprised that Spit got on there with somebody with Bob Ezrin there at the helm, honestly. But I think besides that, though, that I think that it sounded good, but I think that they were a victim of bad timing with this record, because at this point around there, I just think that if this record would have came out maybe, I don't know, a little bit beforehand, or maybe even later after the grunge, phase, it would have probably, I think it would have caught on a bit better. I mean, in '94, I believe it was, Pantera came out with Far Beyond Driven, and that was a huge record. It was like a #1 Billboard record at that point, and that was really, really heavy. I mean, not to say that this is as heavy as that, but if they would have maybe released this record later and put it out then, I think it maybe would have did better if it wasn't battling with, some of the up-and-coming grunge stuff that was going on at the time, I think that it was just the album came out at the wrong time. If it would have came out at a different point, I think it would have did a lot better, because while it did do well initially, I think what it was all the core fans bought it, and then after that it just tailed off and dropped off the charts,
Yeah, and obviously by then there weren't that many core fans left. If it,
No.
it struggled to gold, it had no staying power. Again, same thing that had happened on the previous tour, that they're doing single after single in hopes that something takes so that they can really get out on the road, and they get to the point where they just have to get out on the road, and look what happens as a result. None of these songs had any traction in the market, and you can't blame Polygram for that, because they threw, what was it, 4 or 5? I mean, some of them only went radio promo. They certainly gave the album as much as they could, as much push. And how many? There's 4 videos for it. So
Yeah.
it was just an album that's outside of its time. For me, Spit's the big problem child on this, and it's just that song really does need Ezrin on the songwriting credits to get those Spinal Tap ones out. I think he really could have helped that song, because most of it's okay. It's just that one particular line that I really have a problem, and the name of the song, Spit. I mean, it just doesn't resonate with me. So if Bob could have saved that or done something with it, just said, Gene, there's a movie. You really don't want to do this. I'm fine with God Gave Rock and Roll to You on this. It does not fit. I agree with Lonnie on that. It totally clashes with everything else on there, but it's such a damn good song. It really belongs on a Kiss album, so that Interscope isn't getting the sales for the bogus soundtrack. Car Jam, I agree with you, Lonnie. I don't like it. I don't like what they did with it. I don't like updating it and taking Ace out of the equation, especially when it was his only drum solo that he'd cut in the studio with Ace. And I understand why they did what they did to it, because of Breakout and the similarities, and they didn't want any of that trouble, probably. And they also probably wanted to focus it down. But I think there would have been a much better way of paying tribute to Eric, and I like the live idea, because again, a live 3 without Eric Carr really bothers me to this day. That the bombastic drummer who had been with them from Unmasked all the way through the decade, was never represented properly on a live album. And yes, he had Animalive, what is it, Live Uncensored, Animalize.
Yeah, same.
Not the same as a live album and the full treatment. So the only other thing I would change with Revenge is the front cover, which again, it's like urban camouflage, like the Elders' brown wood was, blending into nothingness in the record stores, into those wooden containers, or that cassettes were. It's just hidden. It's just so bland. I get the concept. I don't have a problem with that, but the band is just so photogenic in their toughened up look that I really think that they should have put them front and center on the front of the album. And I'll leave it at that. All the other songs, there's 1 or 2 on there that I think, okay, that's not quite as good, but it's just such a hard driving, fantastically produced and created album. It's extremely good. That other than those 2 minor changes, I'd pretty much leave it as is. Ken.
I'll have to agree that the album cover could have been a little better. That's for sure. But it wasn't. It was better than Hot in the Shade cover, as far as I'm concerned. But it was good. There's not much wrong with this. I agree that God Gave Rock and Roll to You should have been. To me, I would have put it as the last song on the album. I would have ended it that way. I thought it would have been a nice ending to the album. As for the Car Jam, they could have. I mean, at the time, it was a sentimental kind of thing. When it came out, and it put down there, was kind of cool. But now, looking back, they probably just should have done something else with that. Otherwise, this album's great. I even like Spit. I
do too.
And the real good the 2 things that are really make this a great album is one, Kiss is not following. When they don't follow, they seem to make better music and better sounding albums. I don't know what it is. They're not really following anything on this album. They're not purposely, I don't think, following anybody. And then the second thing is Vinnie Vincent, helping with the songwriting, is another big key here too, which helped. And maybe sparked them a little bit. So, of course, Bob Ezrin's production is just fabulous, top notch. So, not a whole lot wrong with this. It's a great album. I enjoy it.
No, hard to fault a lot of what you said. I mean, it is really good album. We're getting on in time, so let's wrap up today with Alive 3, since we've talked about a live album, and it's really symbiotic with Revenge. Is Alive 3? It's just so tied up. Again, we get into, for me, it's the album cover, the first thing that I see, and I just find it so uninspired, even compared to Alive 2, which is nothing special. At least with Alive 2, you opened up that gatefold and you were blown away with the power and the glory. Yeah, nice. Alive 3, I'm not going to change anything. There's just, I think it's perfectly representative of what they were doing on that tour. I think it's well balanced. It's perfectly adequate. It's good value for money. I would just have made the international version that included Take It Off, the one version released everywhere. I'm not going to add any songs and go through, some of the stuff. I think Parasite is one of the songs that is omitted, but I don't need it. Watching You's on there. I think they did an extremely good job of selecting what tracks did make that album, and other than the front cover, which, I would flip it so that you've got a little bit more focus on Miss Liberty there, the stage.
Mm-hmm.
I would have made that the front cover, and that's it. I just can't change much. Ken, go straight back to you on there.
Yeah, the cover is kind of lacking. I agree. The packaging is kind of lacking of Alive 3. I kind of expected nice, gatefold like the prior Alive albums would have been nice. The other thing is, I didn't like the production sound-wise. I don't like it. And I think if you ask Eddie Kramer, I think he said in interviews that he really didn't do a lot of his own production on it. I think the band had their hands all over this one, and it was just, to me, a little bit too, I don't know, what is it, compressed?
Guitar heavy?
Something like that. It was just too much.
Too tinny, too much treble.
Yeah, and I want a little separation on the sound, the instruments. But yeah, that's the only thing. I mean, the songs, I agree with you. They should have added "Take It Off" on there, like the other European version. But the songs are fine. It's just the production, in my opinion, that was really, it brings it down for me.
Mark, how
So
about
I
you?
changed that.
Well, I think that I kind of surprisingly echo a little bit of what Ken said. I mean, I like the record. I think a lot of it is good. There's something about the production of it that kind of rubs me a little wrong with it. I just find that while Alive 2 was way too much audience mixed in with the music, I find with this record there's not enough audience in spots. I find once they start playing, it just seems like it's a studio recording with audience put in afterwards. It just seems like there's too much separating with that in there. They should have maybe left a little bit more crowd in it, I thought. But I also think that the sound of the guitars, there's something with that in the upper mid range of those guitars that sound a little odd on certain stereo systems whenever I've listened to it. Again, Eddie Kramer, and I've read those interviews as well with him saying that he really didn't have as much of a hand on this as people think. I think they just put him on there to kind of keep up with the whole Alive cachet. Eddie Kramer and Alive, it's like hand in hand, like peanut butter and jelly, right? So I just think that they could have did a little bit better job with it. But the one thing that I would have changed for sure is I would have fired whoever was in charge of doing the inside credits for that, because whoever kept screwing up those things, who put "I Was Made for Loving You" is off of Dress to Kill, they need to be slapped, because not only did they do it then, but it was also done on the 97 thing, and it was also done now on the 2014 vinyl ones. They didn't change it either. So I don't know what they're doing, but they still leave the same mistakes in there through the whole lineage of this record.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't they change that? Why couldn't they fix that? I mean, come on, guys. I mean, this is your history you're talking about. I know it's bad enough Paul doesn't know what albums his songs are on live, but I mean, somebody at Polygram and them should, you know.
Everything's off alive.
Yeah, I know. That's what he seems to do all the time. When he doesn't know, he always refers back to Alive. Cold Gin's off of Alive, or come on, it's just. I just think that this record could have been a lot more for what we expected. I mean, it could have been a little bit better mixed, and I think that would have been it because the song selections were good. I thought that their performances were good. This is the band at its peak. I think that performance-wise, they are in top gear at this point. I mean, you don't want to follow Kiss at this point, I think, on stage because they're just on fire, especially since Eric Singer joined in and since Bruce Kulick finally found his feet by this point. They were unbelievable at this point. It's just I wish they would have had a slightly better mixed record to represent that.
I've been watching the Kissology Volume 3 Palace of Auburn Hills show a lot in the last week. What do you guys think of that? Just as a comparison, do you like that any better in terms of its sound?
I like the way they sound on that better than they do on Alive 3.
Yeah.
I think it's a better representation of what the band sounded like at that point in their career.
I have a few board tapes from this tour that I think sound better than what the Alive 3 is,
Yeah, this is actually a tour where they're, even though it was a bomb of a tour, there are some extremely good shows and some absolutely stunning performances by the band. I think what you said was that they're a powerhouse at this time, and it absolutely comes through in the material. One thing I hadn't said about, mine was I'd broken my leg badly at the time when I got this, and actually my mom got it for me and brought it to me at university. I'm like, can you get me the Kiss album? I was absolutely coked up on meds, and I loved it, so I didn't notice anything wrong with the sound, and I still don't actually, but the Kissology one does sound better. Lonnie, back to you on what would you change on the album.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you guys on a couple things. I would have made it. And I know money was an issue at the time, and that's why it's probably a single disc and not a double disc. But I would have liked to have seen more songs that they played on that tour represented on this album. I would have liked to have seen Parasite. I would have liked to have seen War Machine was a big part of that set list with the Statue of Liberty's face crumbling at, in the middle of that song. So I would like to have seen, and War Machine isn't on. The other two Alives. I mean, it was a song that was recorded after Alive 1 and 2, so I would have liked to have seen that on there. And then, in the encore, they did play Shout It Out Loud and Love Gun. And I think if we would have, I think I would have liked I like the album, but I think I would have liked it even more had we've gotten more of the whole set list that Kiss was playing at the time, especially War Machine and Parasite. I think those are noticeably missing from the track listing. So that's the main thing I would have done. But to echo, what you were saying earlier about the Detroit show, I think they do sound a lot better on that Detroit show off of Kissology than what they do on the record itself. But the band itself was really, in my opinion, it might have been the best the band ever sounded live, was that Revenge era lineup. And especially you get that bonus disc on Kissology 3 of them playing in South America, and they are just on fire. Yeah. That might be my favorite thing. That might be one of my favorite Kiss, maybe my top favorite Kiss video to watch, is them playing in South America in '94. They are just unbelievable how good they sound. I mean, in my opinion, and I've said it on the show before. I mean, I thought that part of me was a little disappointed in '96 and they put back on the makeup, because I knew that I was going to get to see this version of the band, because I thought I thought the band sounded phenomenal. I thought they looked great, and I knew that would never come back. But that's, as far as Alive 3 goes, yeah, and I'm going to echo your sentiment about the cover too. The cover is just atrocious, and I think Julian has a great idea. You just flip them and put that back cover on front and show that Statue of Liberty on the front. And you remember North America, United States in '94, coming off the Gulf War. The country's a lot more unified then than it is now. Yeah. People are a lot more patriotic then than they are now too. I think it it would have made a much bolder and more respected statement by flipping the cover like that also. So
Of course,
I would have made it a double album, and I know money's an issue, and that's probably why it's not. And I would have flipped that cover too.
Of course, they would have had to have blown up Eric and made him 10 times larger, as they do on all Kiss live albums. I mean, have you seen
That Alive 4 album cover?
Yeah, you've seen the Alive 4 on what they did on the Vegas Kiss Rock's Vegas cover.
Awesome.
The gigantic drummer. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. And,
It's not to scale.
not to scale by any means. And I'm just looking back at the. I've just gone and checked out the freaking 23 song set list from Detroit '92, the full thing. Oh my God! Yeah, that was extraordinary, and I'm freaking bummed I missed it, but that's life.
Me too.
Yep. Can't do it. Okay, so I think that's a good place to end.
breaking.
I think we'll have to do a part 4 of this to cover the next albums in the sequence. But you know, we've gone through some of the changes that we'd like to make. We've talked about producers, the sounds, the sonics, the duds of songs, album covers. You know, all facets of what makes an album an album. What are the sort of changes that you guys would like to make to, you know, some of the albums that we've talked about today? Why don't you chime in on the thread on the KissFAQ message board, or on Facebook, or on YouTube, and let us know your thoughts, because, you know, we'd like to have a conversation about these things. And, you know, tell us anything that you think that we missed. There's always something egregious to someone that we have not commented on. And those are the comments that we love the most. So do let us know. But we do appreciate you listening to us today, and we will catch you next time. So from us all, see you next time. Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we've broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.